Hi viewers, and welcome to the channel, and welcome to part 2 of the Python tutorials learning Python in FreeCAD. Now I have to apologize, I realized that I started these tutorials back around 7 months ago and a lot's changed since then. What actually happened is I started the tutorial, got to part 1, and then I went off onto a tangent and basically created a load of beginner tutorials and explaining how to do certain things in FreeCAD from Python's perspective around certain methods and certain techniques, rather than what I was trying to do is start Python from the ground up, teach you the Python language step by step, get used to types, collections and the commands in there and actually how to use that in FreeCAD, rather than going and finding interesting things to do and showing you how to do them. I will keep doing this tutorial and all the other tutorials as well. I mean, this is a sideline, these Python tutorials. It's not what my channel is really focused upon. My channel is really focused upon FreeCAD and modeling FreeCAD, but considering I'm a software engineer as well, I want to teach people how to use Python in there and get used to the Python language, because it can have a dramatic effect on the speed and the things that you can do in FreeCAD. And getting people into the Python language means we got developers learning Python and learning FreeCAD, and they can come up with workbenches. A number of people out there have created workbenches that really set FreeCAD aside from the other CAD packages out there, especially the ones that are online on the horrible cloud system where you have to pay a fee and then all of a sudden your license runs out and then you no longer got a CAD system to work with. And FreeCAD is not that, and that's the reason why I've moved from other CAD packages to FreeCAD, and it's a fantastic project once you get used to it. And this Python console is powerful. It's extremely powerful and you can do a lot with that. So I want to take you from the start to the finish with this learning Python. So I'm sorry if I went off on a tangent and showed you all those clever things that we can do and how to do them. I really want to get back to doing a beginner's course and also doing a few of those things on the side as I find them. This is like a Python Sunday. I'll try to release a Python scripting tutorial every Sunday. Then throughout the week I'll do the modeling and animation in FreeCAD or answer viewers' questions as well. So I'm always open to answering your questions and doing a little video on that. You'll see a number of those on my channel. But I'm going to stop waffling now and get on to part 2. It's a long time, so I've looked back at part 1, which was basically a hello world, and now we're looking at user input from the user. And I'm going to go through importing libraries and using the Q input from the Qt GUI, or known as the Qt libraries. And that will allow you to harvest input from a user and use that in your macros. If you like this video, please hit a like and also subscribe to the channel. I also have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate to my contributions to the community, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0. So in a previous tutorial we went through the hello world macro, and we're just going to recap on that, and that taught you how to use the Python console, the report view and the print command, if I remember correctly, and basically outputting something to screen, and also getting that onto a toolbar, actually how to assign a macro up and place it on your toolbar up here. And this is very simple. We go into macros, and we create a new macro. And this one's just going to be hello world, and we use either the print or the FreeCAD dot console dot print message, and in that we place the words hello world in quotes like so. So we execute that. We've got the executed hello world that comes up in our report view. It also comes out in a toolbar briefly, and we see the Python console. We've got a GUI.send message to active view run. So that's us running this FreeCAD.console.print message in the Python console. So if I took that and ran it in the Python console as well, it will come up hello world here. To get these displayed, if you go up to View, Panels, and Report View, and Python console, then they will be displayed. I do go through how to use the Python console in another tutorial on my channel, so if you want to have a look at that, and that tells you about what we can do with the Python console and how to use it. So we also learned how to get this onto the toolbar to create a little icon that sits on one of these toolbars that we can run this from. And that was pretty easy to do. So considering we've got the hello world macro, this is saved off in a directory on our system, and we can assign that to a button. So if we go to macros, we can go into our macros, and we can see all our macros here and the directory of where it's been saved. And we've got a hello world macro here. And this is what we'll be targeting with the button on our toolbar. To get that on our toolbar, it's pretty easy. If we go up to Tools, Customize, then we get this customization come up. If we look in Macro, we can see all the macros commands there. But what you want is something called Macros, which is here. And we can add a macro into here. Now to do that, if we come up to the Macros tab, and this is where we can add our macro. So any macros we got that are already assigned to the toolbar will come up here. And if I select my macro from this drop down, so these are all the macros, so I'm looking for the hello world there. Menu text, this is what will be on the menu text. You can set this to wherever you want. The tooltip is when we hover over the button. So it's whatever appears if we hover over something. For example, none of this is going to give me a tooltip, is it? No. So it's the little black bar with the white writing in that appears as a hint. So I'm just going to place this as hello world as well. So menu text hello world, place that in there. Hello world macro, there we go. Status text is what happens when we roll over it or click it. I believe it's when we click it, and it places down here the status text. So hello world again. And we can just choose some different things in here if we so decide, but that's all we need really. Not even that, we just need the menu text. Pixmap is the icon we also want to assign it to, so if I click on that, I can assign it to a nice icon. Plenty of them in there. Choose what we want. And I'm just going to select that one. Click add, and it'll add it to the left hand side here. And then we've got to get it onto our toolbar. So we can come into whatever workbenches we want, or toolbars we want, and I'm going to go for toolbars. At the moment on the start bar, so I can pick whatever workbench I want from there. I'm just going to keep with the start, and I'm going to place in my macro. So I'm going to create new. I'm just going to type in here test. So this is going to be a new toolbar that's going to display. And then what we do on the left hand side here, we drop down to macros, which is there, not macro. So macros, and get the hello world, and just press the move right button, and that places that under the test toolbar. Close that, and what you'll see is a little icon here, so you can see when you hover over it, it says hello world, and then if you look down to the bottom left, you can see the status text down there, hello world. And if we click on it, there's a hello world there. So I'm just going to remove that now. So tools, customize, and then I can come into the toolbars. I'm going to get rid of that one, and over to macros, and click on the macro there, and remove that, and then we're back to normal. So the toolbar icon has disappeared, and we're back to square one. So that's a recap of the previous tutorial that we had. So on to the new tutorial, part 2. So for us to capture user input, we need to create a dialog box. Now, FreeCAD is built upon the Qt framework, which is a GUI framework that is available for both Python, C+, and other languages. FreeCAD is actually built with that GUI framework in mind. That's the reason why you can access it via the Python console. Now, if we're allowing the program to take input from the user, then we need to import that Python library. So we've got to import the Qt GUI library. Now when it comes to importing Python, I've got the Python console open down the bottom here. So I've gone to View, Panels, Python console. When it comes to importing, there is a number of ways to import a library. The Qt GUI and Qt core framework that we'll be using in a number of our tutorials come from something called the piste library that's shipped within Python itself. So to import that piste library, we use the words import and piste. Now the capital letters matter here, so I use that. Now we have the library imported. So I can go piste dot, and we see the Qt and Qt core libraries there. So in the Qt GUI, and if I press dot again, we can see that we've got a number of items in there. So Q dialog or Q input dialog, which we'll be using. There it is there. There we go, input dialog. Roll over that and that tells you what it requires. But this is a bit long, so we can use the from import method. So from piste import Qt GUI, and that imports the Qt GUI. So as well as piste dot Qt GUI, we can get to Qt GUI just by typing Qt GUI dot, and we get our Q input dialog there. The reason why I'm showing you this is because we need to import these libraries, but there's many methods of importing those. So the first thing we'll do is when we create our macro, so macros, and we create our macro for input from a user, then the first thing we'll do is from piste import and then the Qt GUI. Now we can actually go further and drill further down into that, and we can use the from piste dot Qt GUI, and then we import Q input dialog. So that's actually imported that input dialog. And you can see that's imported in there. So I've imported a single item from that library. Now, some of you already know some Python, and also probably seen some of my other tutorials. I've used the from piste dot Qt GUI. I can spell it properly. There we go. Import style. Now this is frowned upon now. It is bad practices because you're importing too much. You're importing more than what you need. If I just wanted the Qt input dialog, then I'll just import it here from the piste Qt GUI, and that allows me just to have access to Qt GUI to get that Qt input dialog. I don't need to import everything from Qt GUI because it's just far too much. It takes up memory space and we don't need it. These are called namespaces. Everything in here is a namespace. So we have PySide, and inside that namespace we have Qt GUI and Qt Core, and within that namespace we have these Q input dialog boxes, Q dialogs, Q widget, etc. So they're basically dividers, so you go into different domains of where those items are. And here we're just going from PySide import Qt GUI so that namespace is available. And then when we want to create the dialog box, we just create a new dialog box. So for instance, if I come down to here, I know I've got the Qt GUI imported, and I can go something like dg, which is just a variable name, equals Qt GUI dot Q input dialog, and then we can go, I think it's get text, and then from there, obviously if we need to know the commands that we need to run against that, actual format for commands, there we go. So we need a parent, a title, which is a string, a label, which is a string, and the echo back. And we'll just give a demonstration of that. So for this one, my parent, well, it's none. I haven't got a parent. It's just a dialog popping up. So I'm going to place none in there, and I'm going to give it a title of enter text. And the input string label is going to be give me a value, like so. And we pass a 0 in there. So what will happen? Now I'll pop up this command here, and I can place R in here or whatever text I want, hit enter, and then if I type DG, and there's the value there. So that's the dialog coming back. It's placing that text into DG and giving you that result back when I type in DG. So what you're doing is assigning the outputs of that dialog to the variable DG. And it's a blocking command. So this here is a blocking command. When I say blocking, what that means is that it will run and it will block and wait for a result to come back. And what that returns is a dialog result piped back into DG, so your variable. So we could call this something like dialog result. So if I just type in whatever I want there, type in DG again, and then that comes back as you see there. In fact, we don't actually need that 0 on the end there. So we could just run that and type in what we want and the DG, and there we go. So you can see that we've got tuple coming back, so we've got selection that's come back from there. So tuple is a collection, and in there you've got two items. And one is your text that you've input, and the other one is a Boolean value that's come back. So the reason why we put 0 in there is because that's all we need to come back. So if I wanted the actual Boolean value, I would place a 1 in here. And when we enter something and then type in DG again, we get the true back. If I ran this, like so, and just press cancel, and put the DG in there, we get a false. So the last bit is the actual dialog result that's coming back, something called a dialog result. So true, false. If it's closed, it will be false. If it's cancelled, it will be false. If we've got an OK that's come back, they hit enter or hit the OK button, then that will come back as true. But because we only need the text, then we specify a 0 at the end. So what this is doing is when this comes back and type in DG, compared to our other method, which brings back a tuple, Now type in DG again. You can see by specifying 0, what this is basically the result of this. We specify the 0 on the end, we just get whatever result in that collection is at index 0. So 0 and 1, and that's what's just being pulled back there. So this is great for your macros, because this is what we'll be using for your macros if we've got a simple macro and we want to harvest some values from the user before we actually run that macro and use those values in our macro. For instance, if I use something like a variable of, let's say, scale, and I'm just going to change this a bit into scale, and scale of body, say, and we place in there 12, and if I type in scale it comes back as 12, but I should have placed a 0 in there. There we go. And type in scale, and you can see it's come back as 12. But you've got to note something here, is that's come back as a string value. And we have to be careful with the types that come back. So anything that comes back from the Q input dialog, and it's got the words there, get text, so that should give you a clue of what's coming back. It comes back as a string value. So in programming, there's many types. So you've got numerics, which are integers, floats, doubles, and we've got text-based, which is basically strings, and we've got many other types in there, so boolean, true, false, etc. So we need to be careful when these come back, because we have to do a type conversion, because we can't use 12 for, I don't know, something like your body in XYZ space. So if we're using that to pump into a vector, then you won't be able to pump that into a vector because you're placing X as the string value of 12 when it needs to be a float or a double value. So it needs to have that position in there, and it needs to be a numeric value. So for instance, 12 equals 12, that'll come back as false. So I've just used the Python console to check my types. So 12 equals 12, that will be true. So you can see that is not the same as a numeric 12. So you're comparing a string 12 for numeric, and that matters, because if we try to add that to our position in XY space, then that will probably error. That will error if you specified that. So you need to do type conversions, and we'll get to that in another video, but for now we'll just carry on as we are, because we're just dealing with getting some input from a user. So we've got this from PySide import Qt GUI, and I'm going to use the command here, Qt GUI dialog get text. This one here, and I just can call this user input value equals, and then it's the Qt GUI.q input dialog.get text, and we need the parent, which we haven't got a parent because we're using the Python console or a macro. Parents are in the macro, but you're looking at a parent object, and this isn't an application, this is a single script. So there's really no need to place a parent in there. So we just place none. So none means nothing in Python. And I'm just going to place enter a value in here. And next is our label for our text box. And we can use please enter a value. And then we need to close that bracket, open a square bracket, because what's being pulled from here is something called a tuple, which is a collection. So it's a collection of items, and we need the very first thing in that collection. Now that's 0 based, so we use 0. So there's 2 items in there, 0 and 1. If there was 3 items in there, it'd be 0, 1 and 2. And then what I'm going to do then is output that to the screen. Well, not to the screen, to the report view. So we've got to View, Panels, Report View. Then we've got this report view over here. So let's clear that down. And to access that report view, you can use the command print, but I would steer away from using print, because in programming you can spawn processes on different threads, and I'm not going to go into it for this tutorial, but if using print it can get lost. So we need to use FreeCAD's command of FreeCAD.console.printMessage, and in there I'm going to pass user input value. Now because this is a string, we don't have to do any conversions because we're just outputting a string. Now if we come over to this and just clear this off, and I'll show you what that does. So FreeCAD dot, and you can see we've got items in there. So console, there we go, dot print message, and then we can pass in something in here, and it will come out on the left hand side here. So that's all that is. So when you run this, you can pull the user input value, and then anything after the script you can actually use that user input value in here. But as I said, we have to change the type if we're placing something in a vector or changing the position of something that requires a numeric value, and what we'll do is get into that in our next videos. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to my site, and also I have a Ko-Fi site where you can actually donate a few pence or a few pounds, dollars, or whatever your currency is, and that's at ko-fi.com/mang0, and there you'll be able to help me fund my site, and all the money that I actually get from any funds will actually get pushed back into the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing. I'll see you next time.